Hey, welcome back to All Things Baseball Podcast. I'm Johnny, and this is John here, your host for today. And we're going to be talking about the current state of baseball, where it's at internationally, domestically, and all things that go along with it. Cue the intro music.
Right into
Current
it.
state of baseball.
All right, the current state of baseball. When we talked about this, the current state of baseball, it was two real main points. It was the popularity of the game, right? And then it was the quality of the game.
Yeah.
So popularity of the game, we did a little bit of research and, we kind of delved into, how is the game and the viewership in terms of like Fox and ESPN, which have big contracts with Major League Baseball. I don't know if you knew this, but last year's World Series was like one of the lowest rated World Series, and that might have been because of who was in it.
The Rangers and
the Diamondbacks. So I would say that's probably the biggest reason why. Normally, an average Major League World Series the viewership would be like 11 million, 12 million, like when the Yankees are in, or a team that has a lot of stars. But I would say that in general, both Fox and ESPN keep renewing their contracts with Major League Baseball because they're making money from it. They see the star power of some of these new players and the power and all that.
And not just like those platforms. Apple TV has joined in.
Right.
I think Amazon Prime's getting in on the action. All these other streaming platforms have really bought into streaming live, not just baseball, but football games, soccer games, and I think it only helps, right?
Yeah, so these are billion-dollar industries, and they continue to, increase. So that's a good thing for baseball, right?
For sure.
I mean, that's good. And then they have the World Baseball Classic, which since 2006. So there's a little bit of history there of viewership. And I don't know if you knew this. I just looked it up before we got on. That the last World Baseball Classic, there were 5.2 million viewers in the U.S. that watched the World Baseball Classic. And U.S., as you know, lost to Japan. Shohei Ohtani struck out Mike Trout for the last out of the game.
It was a great finale.
60 million Japanese watched. That's almost half of their country. So when we talk about the popularity of baseball internationally, it's really never been more popular.
Yeah, I know the KBO, NPB, the Japanese Professional Baseball League. Is there another Asian
There's a Mexican
baseball?
league.
Mexican league.
There's a I don't know if Taiwan has a professional league. I don't think they do.
No, I just know that their fan base is very strong. When I watch games of them on YouTube, like, you want to talk about like a breath of fresh air for baseball, watch like a NPB or KBO game or Dominican game. Like, there's so much energy.
Yes.
And we're going to talk about later on in the podcast about the flashiness of players and how that's progressed into the game. But when you see it over there, it's basically normal. I mean,
yeah, it's very different. They bang gongs and drums.
They have a full band during Japanese games. Like,
yeah,
could you imagine that? Like in American baseball?
No. I mean, they do the wave. But
the wave, yeah.
I mean, that came out in the 70s.
That's slowly.
I invented the wave. I don't know if you knew that.
Invented the wave.
It was 1977. It was a soccer game in Giant Stadium.
What was it known as then? What was it known as then?
It was known as the John.
It was just the hands up. Yeah, it was the John Magini.
It was the hands up. But yeah, I mean, so popularity of the game. Yeah. We talk about the state of the game of baseball. There's a lot of competing things for people now. There's so many different things. I mean, I know just in here in Huntsville, there's a lot of kids that don't play baseball. They play lacrosse. And so lacrosse has taken on some more popularity and taken away from baseball. When we were growing up, you played baseball, football, and basketball, and then some guys played hockey during the winter. Yeah. Some guys wrestled. Guys who didn't play football played soccer because we did that in the fall. But, I mean, those were the three main sports, and baseball was America's pastime. Why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. I mean, I felt like when I played, it was pretty glamorized for being a baseball player. Like, you get that title. Mostly everybody knows you if you're kind of around campus or at school. But I think maybe it doesn't become as popular or pristine as like a college football player or a high school football player. So maybe there's that aspect of it where maybe it's not the highest popularity, if you want to call
Yeah,
it.
there's competing things
Definitely.
for that now, for sure.
If people are looking for a title and looking for the flashiness and want like culture, then they'll go to basketball or football where you can create a little bit of a personality with your game. Whereas in baseball, it's not saying the other sports are not team sports, but you get a little bit more of an independence with your play. With football and basketball, baseball, you get a position, and there's more positions. There's less independence to it. Maybe that's not the popularity factor.
Yeah, I
I
mean,
mean,
listen, it also
maybe it
regionally,
is
like Texas is football, football, football. Alabama's probably more of a football state than a baseball state.
definitely
Florida, I mean, baseball's really popular in Florida. It's probably 50-50. Georgia, I mean, in that area of Marietta where we go, Cobb,
baseball. Yeah,
baseball.
baseball.
So I guess it depends on where you go in the country. But in terms of just popularity, we know that baseball's coming back to the Olympics.
Mm-hmm.
We talked a little bit about that earlier. 2028, there's going to be baseball back in the Olympics in Los Angeles. There's no baseball in France for the 2024 Olympics. So for those of you who didn't know that, but the World Baseball Classic, again, in terms of popularity, I mean, last year's final was pretty big. What's interesting about it is Japan has won 3 of the World Baseball Classics. The U.S. won one in 2017, and the Dominican Republic, I think, won one as well. So there was some COVID years that they didn't have it, but
Right. Yeah.
there's only been like 5, I think, maybe 6.
Okay.
But Japan is baseball crazy, and they have factories and like just they're trained for baseball, morning, noon, and night.
I
So
mean, arguably one of, if not the greatest player currently, and will be a future Hall of Famer, Shohei Ohtani from
yeah,
Japan. Ichiro Suzuki's from Japan. He's an
yep,
all-timer who's going to be a Hall of Famer probably next year.
right.
Should be unanimous. But yeah, I mean, the state of baseball right now with all of the international players coming over and helping improve the game and popularizing it, and bringing their culture into the game is so important. I know we were hammering it in earlier, but I think having, all walks of life join in the game is, I don't know, it just feels so important. What do you feel about it?
Yeah, I listen. I know from
Flashiness.
when you played, when we played, when we went up to Cooperstown and you played, teams from Miami, and there was Cuban teams, Cuban American teams and Dominican Republic teams, kids from from Miami that their parents were from there or whatever. But we saw lots of cultures. We saw Hawaii teams. We saw teams from all over different parts of our country. So we enjoyed that, and that we talk about
It
that.
was so
We
much
we
fun.
loved listening to the people in the stands and how they cheered for their teams and stuff like that. We felt like that was a bonus. Like, hey, these guys, this is the way they do it, and so yeah, I do think that's a big part of it. And anything that really promotes the sport in a
Mm.
positive way is a good thing. And so if the Japanese have their way and the Latin American teams have their way and we have
It
our
it
way, there's nothing wrong
Yeah,
with it
and it
melding
is
together.
different. I think the flashiness is definitely more of a Dominican, Puerto Rican, Venezuelan, somewhat in Curacao. I think those maybe not as flashy because you look at guys like Kenley and Mariano who weren't the flashiest.
Well, one of your old coaches, Ingemar, was Curacao, right?
Yes,
So
Curacao,
he
yeah,
was very quiet and
he was, and that's
easygoing.
why I say that. Like
You know,
Jurickson Profar, I believe maybe somebody can correct me if he's from Curacao from the Padres. I mean, not all of them are flashy, but when you look at that compared to like somebody from Japan who is very quiet, like Otani,
right?
uh, Ichiro Yoshinobu Yamamoto, who just came over the Dodgers this year, Shota Imanaga, like some of these new stars. So when you look at them, you see like there's personality, but it's very humble, very much respect to the game.
I think so. I mean, I know that sometimes people get upset when the baseball players they show off for the home run. I mean, I heard Hank Aaron say that he would never have done that.
Bat flips
Bad
and
flips
yeah,
and watching the ball and stuff like that. But listen, Reggie Jackson did that in the '70s, so it's not like it just came about. You know, people were doing that, throughout, but just not as much. Now, every home run. What my only problem with is that when they hit a ball off the wall, they get held to a single because they were watching it thinking it was going
It
out.
drives me crazy. I saw a
Because it
video
costs
today
so
of it. Yeah,
yeah.
no, that stuff drives me crazy.
But so really, just in terms of popularity, before we get to the quality of the game, I think that it's at a good place. I wouldn't say that it's at an all-time high, but
No.
it's in good shape. I think one of the things that makes it in really good shape, which you could speak to a little bit more, is the trading cards side.
Well, yeah, that's one of my hobbies. I love trading cards. And not just baseball, football too, soccer, some basketball. It's helped so much for the game with players getting involved now, doing neat little inscriptions that they do. I saw Bobby Witt, he played with a card in his back pocket to actually make it player worn and player used. It's stuff like that, even you don't see. Um, and I'll speak into the because I know anybody out there that's collecting or starting to collect. I'll speak to the hobbyists and people that are just starting out, people that are doing breaks and breakers that you buy them for spots. I think it helps, and it can hurt in some way. I think it helps because you can buy into a team and get a $500, $700 card like we've seen before. Some of the hits that I'll show you, but when hobbyists and collecting new players and rookies and watching their value appreciate, and then also the players joining in on the hobby and
Oh, no question. I mean,
helping
it's
it out. Yeah,
created something. I mean, let's just say that baseball card trading is at an all-time high,
for
right? We
sure.
know
Yeah.
this. We have a friend in town who owns um, a premier place for trading
Yeah.
cards, and baseball is at an all-time high. I mean, he's shared that with us. We know that from going to shows, trading card
Mm-hmm.
shows. I think the thing that is so cool about it is that people who probably never played baseball before or didn't play at a high level, maybe didn't play past little league or junior high or middle school. You see them at these shows, and they love the game. They
Oh,
love the game. They love the
so much.
stats. They love the advanced stats. They love the Moneyball stuff. They love like a lot of the nerdy stuff with baseball. I call it nerdy stuff. The stuff that they love, it brings them to the game. So they watch the game. They follow the game. They're in fantasy, baseball. So there's a popularity there. I mean, that's at an all-time high. I know you're in a fantasy league. I'm in a fantasy league.
Yeah,
So
not doing
popularity,
not doing very
not too,
good.
but popularity wise, all these things factor. I think we agree that game's in good shape. Certainly, it could always be better because you've got competing against these other sports and things like that. And baseball, some people consider it a boring sport. Some people just when they try out for multiple sports, they don't like baseball for like they're sitting around in the outfield
Yeah.
or it's not active enough for them. But they
Well,
may not.
I do really appreciate the MLB implementing the faster games, like the new rules for faster games, because it does help the players who are already on edge about playing 3+ hour games for a 9 inning game, and like you said, standing in the outfield for 9 innings. It doesn't sound appealing to anybody, especially if you're not getting any action. But as us, who we've played and coached our whole lives, I mean, it's glamorous to us because we love it so much. It's this.
Well, it's almost got to be in your blood. I
Yeah, it
mean,
does for
it
sure.
really baseball is one of those sports, and that's why I think the Latin American teams there's a rich history there, and they just absolutely eat
It's
it up. They love it.
generations and generations of
Yeah,
Vladimir
it
Guerrero,
gets in it
Tatis. Yeah,
gets in your blood, and you really have a feel for because baseball actually, as boring as some people think it is one of the most dramatic games on the planet when you get to the ninth inning and you've got power pitcher
yeah.
versus power hitter. I don't
Oh
know how many
yeah,
times I saw Reggie Jackson's up against Bob Welch in the
yeah.
'70s, World Series, and they struck him out, and everybody goes crazy. Like that type of one-on-one matchup you don't find in other
Oh,
sports,
for sure.
but you got to kind of get through
Uh,
the game to
yeah.
get to that.
I watched that. I watched the Gagne versus Barry Bonds.
Right.
What's Giant Stadium?
What back then?
I think it's
Candlestick.
the Giant Stadium.
Well, I think that one was probably when was it Pac Bell or whatever?
Yeah, it's the one we were at.
Yeah,
Yeah.
PNC or whatever. What?
PNC.
I
Yeah,
can't
whatever.
remember what it's called.
Anyways,
The one with the big glove in left field.
yeah, I watched that one, and Gagne, like, he was taking him deep into the count, and I think Bonds ended up hitting one into the ravine,
Right.
on like a 3-2 count. So it's so cool to watch old footage of that, and then.
But speaking of that, and I think this is a good place to maybe transition to the quality of the game, right?
Yeah.
So speaking of that, Gagne threw 100. Barry Bonds, I know he did steroids. I mean, the quality of the game. What do you think of the quality of the game now compared to maybe even when you started playing it when, 15 years ago?
I think it's gotten a lot better. We were joking about the training methods, about how people have gotten stronger and faster, and
right. I think I said something like, I don't think Mickey Mantle ever did a double goblet Bulgarian split squat, and that's the type of thing that you would do in today's training.
Oh, for
That's
sure.
a shout out to Brian Utley.
Band work, long toss, stuff like that. I think that's helps phenomenally get hitters and pitchers to
we know
really
this.
Great place.
We know this. Tom Verducci did an article in Sports Illustrated in December 2023 that basically said that even since 2015, there are like 50% more pitchers that can throw 100 miles an hour in today's game, or at least when he wrote it in December 23, than there were in 2015. So in terms of quality of pitching, like we went back and looked at, the strikeouts from, I don't know if people really realize that back in the 20s and 30s, each team struck out maybe 4 times a game.
Yeah.
And now they strike out close to 9 times a game. So, pitching, and I equate that to more the pitching is superior than
it's the spin. The strikeout rate has gone up from 1920 to 2022 hasn't been raised 7.8%,
right,
which is extremely high. The balls in play have gone down from 1920 to 2022.
And we were talking about major leagues,
correct?
Right? Obviously, we don't have these stats
baseball.
for for college or whatever, but we do. We acknowledge that in terms of the major leagues and the quality of the pitching is tremendous. I think the biggest difference for me is the strikeouts. Right, like there's just so many more pitchers that they have filthy stuff, and the spin rates and the movement and then they have more more types of pitches than they had before.
In 2019, there were just over 1,000 pitches thrown over 100 miles per hour. 2023, guess how many?
How many?
3,700.
Really? So more than 3 times.
So over 3 times, yeah. But like stuff like that, like you see why like strikeout rates are so much higher now is because, and the balls in play are so much lower. It's because guys are working on their spin rate. They're working on different mechanics in their pitching to deceive the hitters.
Yeah.
And if the game's gotten better for anybody, it's definitely the pitchers.
The pitching is better. I don't think you can dispute that, even though my favorite pitchers like Sandy Koufax and Tom Seaver and Bob Gibson and Satchel Paige, we did this on the last podcast. The best ones to me are from different eras, but there are more pitchers. The quality of the pitchers, there's just so many more of them. Now, the power game, it's interesting. When we talk about the quality of the game, if you dropped a team like from the 1961 Yankees, into today's day and age, and just played the 2023 Yankees, they'd probably get beaten pretty badly. But only because they would have to get used to the velocity. They would have to get used to 92 mile an hour sliders. I don't think talent wise, it was different, but it's hard. Like that, the pitchers are so well developed that if you took the 1961 Yankees, this is a debate that people have all the time. Is like, who could Babe Ruth have been a great player today? Well, if you just drop Babe Ruth, who he was in the 20s, into 2023. He'd probably struggle. But I got to tell you, talent's talent, and he had an elite swing, and so he would have figured it out. He may not have had a 344 or whatever it was, 340 lifetime batting average.
No way.
But he would have been a beast.
I think in some regards, I think he would have had trouble, but he would have, with the better equipment. I don't think anybody used maple up until, somebody can fact check this. We can, fact check it later too. Maple bats weren't really introduced until like 70s, 80s, maybe later.
Yeah, we saw some of those bats in the museum that we went to
They were
down there.
huge,
They were
50-ounce bats, 40 ounce,
It's
45
insane.
ounce bats.
I don't know how they use those. But one thing I wanted to talk about in terms of the quality of the game, and you got to remember where we're at now. We're in the post-steroid era, what
Modern
you call the
baseball.
modern baseball era.
Well, I think a lot of people call it. Yeah.
Right, a lot of people call it that too. Before that was the steroid era. That was
Yeah.
kind of like mid '90s to mid 2000s. Before that was the free agency era. It was like mid '70s to the mid '90s. Then before that you had integration, Jackie Robinson.
Mm-hmm.
Before that you had the live ball era, and before that you had the dead ball era. And one thing that we researched, we thought was fascinating in terms of the quality of the game. Did you know that pre-dead ball era that the home plate was only 12-inch square, and they didn't count foul balls as strikes?
Tell the viewers what it is before what it is now.
Well, it's set right. So it's a 17-inch.
Yeah.
Is it like a hectagon? I don't know. Pentagon? I don't know. It's a 5-point. You've seen
Hexagon?
the home plates.
Yeah.
But it's. I should know that. Sorry, but it's.
I think a pentagon
it's
is
17 inches across versus 12 inches. So the pitchers. I mean, that's why you had guys who hit into 420. You see all these guys. Rogers Hornsby and Honus, as you like to call him from the last podcast, Honus Wagner, hitting 410. I mean, in the 1800s, they had a 12-inch plate, and they didn't count foul balls as strikes. Now you get into the dead ball era, and all of a sudden now, 17-inch plate. Guys like Christy Mathewson, he could throw an emery ball, he could throw a spitball, a shine ball, he could throw all these things. Then you get into the live ball era, and they eliminate, and you're not allowed to throw an emery ball or a shine ball. So you see all through these eras, these changes evolving of the game.
What is an emery ball?
It's like when you take, it's almost like taking sandpaper and making like huge scratches. So you would have like a file in your glove, and you would emery the ball just to make a huge gash in it to make it move.
Could you imagine if like Max Scherzer today tried to do that? Or like somebody of today's game, like they'd get tossed immediately. And that's something that has changed. Guys, the glove checks and using spider tack and any sticky substances, you get tossed immediately. And there's like a 5-game suspension, whatever it is.
Yeah, and it escalates after each infraction. So I would say this. So we're in agreement that pitching is definitely evolved, and it's better than it's ever been.
Definitely.
Right? Now, there's going to be people who disagree, but I will tell you that in terms of spin rates, in terms of ball movement, you never saw the velocities and the movement that they have these pitchers throwing today. Now, maybe they didn't. Maybe the Maddoxes and the people who there's always going to be those outliers that were better individual pitchers, but just in terms of overall teams. These guys.
You didn't have multiple guys.
These guys were incredible, and batting average. We did look at the average batting, batting average of some of these teams. Like the Yankees' batting average, a decent batting average for a team is like 235 now, 240. Now, back in the day, like the 1961 Yankees, their team batting average was like 268, 270.
Yeah.
So, and that was one of the greatest teams of all time. The team batting average of the 1927 Yankees was 313. Okay, so obviously pitching has gotten so much better so that the team batting average is our 235, 240.
But I think the power numbers have jumped,
So why don't you talk a little bit about the power and how that's changed the game?
So with emphasis on exit velocity and launch angle, hitters just now have the advantage to know where to strike the ball, how to get their hands leveraged to the baseball, and hit more home runs every year consistently. And I know I can't speak for every team in the league with the power numbers, but overall, I would say, I think I have pulled up here, the home run rates have gone up. Let's see.
Yeah, they have gone up.
There's from 1920, it was about 1.1 percentage. I'll have to look into how they rated this. And now it's over like 1.7, 1.8.
And what does that number reflect? Home runs per.
Yeah, this is home run hit rate. For this must be like by thousands, I believe. I'll have to go back and look.
Well, I do know that as much as we talk about home runs increasing and all that, I mean, there's still less than 4 home runs hit every game between the two teams. It's like averages like 3 a game. So like the Yankees are on pace to hit. Well, they've hit so far 240 home runs. Excuse me, 140 home runs in 98 games.
That's
So
ridiculous.
that's like 1.4 a game, and that's considered great. But I mean, baseball is still more than just hitting home runs. People gravitate towards it. It's more exciting.
Yeah.
But look at the Japanese. They don't hit a lot of home runs. They've won the World Baseball Classic. They know how to play the game and advance runners. And so I tend to think that while popularity-wise, the power pitchers, the power hitters take the game to new heights because people love it. Certainly someone like Ohtani can throw 100 miles an hour and hit the ball 500 feet. That's what people gravitate towards. I mean, to me, in terms of the quality of the game, I like the way the Japanese play the game.
I do, yeah.
I like the way they can play small ball.
Mm-hmm.
They obviously have some power hitters over there. Not as many. They have some power pitchers over there.
They use the one-legged swing. Can you talk about one-legged swinging?
Well, I mean, that gets into the training of the game, and we'll probably get a little more into that in another podcast. But
I believe they have higher averages and who's one of the recent number one or first round picks in the draft is a one-legged swinger.
Right.
I think it's that kid.
Well, they definitely have a philosophy over there.
Yeah.
And how they hit. It's a little bit different than you see here in the United States for sure. They do that one-legged swinging for the timing, I think. I can't speak too much of it on this podcast. We'll research it for the next one. But to your point, I mean, you've got a quality of baseball that's won 3 World Baseball Classics, and they don't play the power game as much as we play over here or in the Dominican Republic or places like that. So just thinking in terms of the quality of the game, I tend to think, and I miss advancing run, like the skill of advancing runners, the skill of deception in the game.
Mm-hmm.
We talked a little bit about this.
Yeah.
Remember I was telling you about when I was playing, first baseman would come off first base real quick on a double play to try to influence the umpire. You do the phantom tags. I remember a play in high school where I actually did a sweep tag, missed the runner, but the umpire was out of position, and they gave me the out because I did this. I showed him the ball and all that stuff. So there's a deception and an intimidation to the game of baseball that's no longer there, and that bothers me because to me it diminishes the game a little bit, the quality of the game.
Definitely.
And so I think that's a missed aspect. I understand why there's so much money in the game today that they don't want people getting hurt. Guys who make millions of dollars, they don't want them getting hurt, so they
shortens their career.
For sure, the guys that happened to the guys in the in the early days. But when you were watching a game from like the 60s and 70s, and you watched like Hal McCray, you remember?
I remember you showed me those videos. Yeah, Albert Bell, you said.
Even in the 90s,
punched that guy.
Well, fights are different. I mean, like the intimidation of the game.
It was breaking up.
Breaking up the double play where he just barreled into the
guy. Yeah, like you don't see that stuff anymore.
So quality of the game, again, getting back to the state of the game, it's very different. You can't break up double plays. They go to instant replay on everything, right? Which we talked about, right?
Right.
So tell me your position on some of the rules of the game where they've changed and evolved for the quality of the game.
Yeah, so they want to speed up the games. I think I looked and it was over an average of 3 hours per game, which is
right.
A long time, especially if it's a pitcher's duel.
Right.
And recently, this past season, right? They implemented the pitch clock.
Yeah, it was
just this past season.
Just this season, yeah.
They implemented the pitch clock where now you get, I believe it's 18 seconds between pitches for a pitcher. And the batter has about 8 seconds. Yeah, it's like 8 seconds. We've watched so many games. Probably should know this by heart. But this speeds
Do you like it?
I love it. I think
Yeah.
it's to keep games under 3 hours is it helps people. It helps keep people engaged.
For sure.
Um,
No doubt.
because I know when I'm watching like a football game or a soccer game, where there's almost constant action, especially with soccer, especially with hockey, it's
Right.
always moving.
Right? Go Rangers.
Go Rangers, right? Football, you get timeouts, you get stoppage clock, 2-minute warning. There's always something going on where it's a stop and go, but it keeps moving at a faster pace than baseball, of course.
So
But now baseball, to kind of wrap it up, this pitch clock and the one timeout for the batter, like this just keeps the game moving so much faster. Now I think you got average of like 2.5 to 2 hours and 45 minutes.
I heard one of the announcers say the other day, it's all great until World Series time something's decided, by like a pitch clock violation, and then everybody's going to go crazy.
I did
like
see
the World
that,
Series decided by that. But I agree with you. So pitch clock is good. Not changing. What do you think about those throws over to first base? You only get 3.
That was 2.
You get you
3. Oh,
you get
3. You get 3 total, right?
Yeah, 3 total.
3 is 3 disengagements. If you get 2, you have 1 more and you have to get them. Otherwise, that disengagement, they can move to second.
Right.
I understand that aspect of them trying to speed it up. The throwovers and the disengagements, lowering them down. You don't get unlimited. I think the run game is going to increase.
Seems to,
and it has.
Not with the Yankees though. Jeez.
Yeah,
with some teams.
Our poor catchers, they have noodle arms. Yankee catchers, but
they won't be watching.
I hope not. I hope so, but no offense, buddy.
But moving past that, we only got a few minutes probably left here, and I want to kind of get to like which ones like this the robot the umpire strike zone thing. They're going to probably at some point they do it in the minor leagues where you can actually very quickly challenge the strike.
Yeah, you can challenge calls even with the real umpire.
Right.
Like single, double, and triple.
Is that a good thing for the state of the game? Is that good for baseball?
100%.
I would agree with you on the strikes and balls for that. I don't like, some of the aspects of, like I said, the deception of the game where they go to the replay on everything. I don't know. I'm more old school in that regard. But let's just say in general that so far the rule changes have been positive. We both don't like the international rule. But we also agree, especially the major leagues, since you play so many games.
Right.
You can't have 18, 19 inning games anymore.
No.
So that's probably fine.
That's pushing 4.5 hour games.
Right. Even though it's weird seeing runner on second.
It's like Little League, yeah.
Right. So we agree with that.
Yeah.
What about, let's wrap it up with the influence of advanced stats and Moneyball and scouting and where this is going. Like we like analytics, right?
Yeah.
We've talked about this. We like analytics. We like OPS especially.
Mm-hmm.
We think that's a great stat, but WAR and some of the advanced stuff and how it changes the way they scout. I mean, anybody's seen Moneyball, you know the difference between an old school scout and an analytics scout.
Yeah, I mean, OPS, you can see on base and you can see slugging for what they are. But when you combine those two, generally a great player is going to be in the 800, 900 mark. Anything above that's superstar, beyond phenomenal. Below 800, then you have to look individually at on base and slugging and figure out, okay, if I'm in the bottom of the ninth and I need a guy to get on base, and we were talking about this earlier.
Yeah.
If we want a guy to get on base, or we want to try to
contact guy.
Yeah, contact guy, or slug the winning home run, are we going to pick the guy who has a slug of maybe 502? Or are we going to pick the guy who has it on base?
See, this is where I think they get it wrong. They always pick the home run guy to get the home run. And what are the chances are that he's going to get a home run against the closer and he strikes out 150 times a year? Or, well, if he's a bench guy, he's probably not up that much. But he strikes out 30% of the time. I mean, we talked about this before. Mm-hmm. Here's some stats for you. In Ted Williams' worst year, he struck out 50-something times in the year. Okay, whereas now, like Aaron Judge will strike out 150 times this year, and nobody, because he'll walk over 100 times and have 64 home runs. Nobody thinks twice of it. But back in the day, Guys like Ted Williams, Joe DiMaggio, they didn't strike out but 30, 40, 50 times. And so everybody goes to, well, we'll take the guy off the bench to hit the home run, and then you always see him strike out. It just seems.
Yeah.
I tend to go more towards the contact guys. They overdo the analytics, in my opinion, in some of those instances. They take a guy like, they used to take Aaron Hicks off the bench for the Yankees,
I remember that,
and
yeah.
they'd be like, why? Yeah, he's got a little juice, but they know his holes. They're going to just pitch to,
Yeah.
he'll.
They would shift him on lefty, and anything they would never bring him in
Right.
righty. I believe. I don't think they ever brought him in against the
Right.
lefty.
So, do you think analytics has helped or hurt the quality of the game of baseball?
I think they've helped in some regard, like OPS for sure.
Kind of highlights some things like OPS,
The
like
hard hit ball rate
on base
is super.
guys,
Yeah.
like Moneyball,
Definitely. I think the hard hit ball rate.
hard hit
When
ball
you look,
rate.
they were talking about Julio this year and how his average was so low to start the first month and a half, and he wasn't worried, and I don't think any other analysts were worried because they said his hard hit rate was so high, 30-40%, that he was just getting unlucky, and that's kind of a
Yeah.
We were talking about like an unlucky stat. Is there an attribute or an analytic for that? And
they're digging. They're always coming up with new stats. I would say this: where analytics, I think, hurts is in the amateur levels. So, for example, you've got high school players who are trying to reach certain exit velocities. They're trying to reach, launch angles, and they're trying to hit home runs. And we know that a high school team, they may only hit 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 home runs in a season. And yet everybody's trying to jack home runs. And a lot of the amateurs in high school and lower, they really should be working on their contact.
Yeah.
I mean, and they don't, because they see all this training and for power and power and power, and they forget about the other. So to me, where analytics hurts is in the amateur ranks. Larry Boas of the world was cut from high school, but was a great professional player. It wasn't because he could hit for power. It's because he was a great baseball player. And I don't know you're going to find those guys make the major leagues anymore. Larry Boas of the world, they just don't get cut from their high school and keep at it. So I think for me, just kind of wrapping this thing up, like analytics is good, but it's misapplied. And I think, and I have some really good friends who are coaches who I think agree with me and probably will share with me offline. But I said, I think the quality of the game is good because of the pitching, mostly. The defense seems to be just as good as past years. Yeah. There's definitely some great defenders. I would say that's the case. Popularity, I mean, just to bring this all into conclusion, we feel like the game's in a good place. The quality of the game is good. The training is phenomenal, but again, sometimes that analytics and sometimes that training is misapplied, and you really have to understand, who your amateur athlete is. And so, we thought it'd be interesting to kind of talk about these things on the podcast, and then maybe hear back from some of the people who watch. They might have a different view.
Closing thoughts. I think the game has gotten to a good place. There are things that can improve, like I think fan attendance can be improved in some places. It is heartbreaking.
We didn't talk about small market teams versus large markets and how they differentiate money.
I'll brush over it just a little bit, with Oakland being one of them, moving to Vegas. I think that is so heartbreaking, because imagine our New York Yankees were a small market team and we were going to have to move to, like, I don't know, Connecticut, or it wouldn't be Connecticut, but somewhere with a higher population.
No, I agree.
Somewhere that if New York was smaller.
Yeah, we didn't spend any time on that part. Maybe that's for another day. But I would say that that's
it's got to be heartbreaking.
Money plays a huge part in it, and so we probably should have spent more time on that. But we respect your time, and we want to thank anybody who's watching us.
Yeah, subscribe to All Things Baseball podcast. We'll be posting Tuesdays at 11 a.m. weekly. So thank you.
It really helps us if you
cue the outro.
All right, thanks.